Thank you. So now our next speaker is Mark.
Thank you for having me. So, there are two definite goals. Number one, meet a stranger. And number two, learn how to explain climate change. So let's start with number one. I would like you to introduce yourself to someone you don't know, and I want you to find out the year that they were born. And there is method to my madness. So talk to someone just for a few seconds who you don't know. What's their name and what year were they born?
What's your name?
Mike, what year were you born?
1987.
Close. So you might be the winner. Okay. Does everyone Does everyone know the year that the other person was born? Yeah. Okay, cool. Was anyone here born in 1988? You get a big spongy kiss if you were. Okay, year either side. 1987, 1987. Great. Anyone want to hazard a guess why someone who's doing a PhD about climate change would be obsessed with the year 1988? Any takers?
Records began?
No. Records, parts per million of concentration in the atmosphere began in the 50s. Any other takers? Yep.
Was something related with enshrining law?
No, that was 1992, and it wasn't really a law. Any other takers?
Is that the point where we could have done something?
Yeah, probably the last minute. Okay.
Sustainable development was invented?
87. Yes, his year of birth. Okay, so what happened is in 1957 they started measuring the atmospheric concentration of carbon dioxide, which goes up, and that's when we're going to come to point two, is how to explain climate change. And for 30 years the scientists were going, it's going up because we're burning fossil fuels. We should really do something about this. In 1965, there was a speech by the President of the United States going, we're changing the chemical composition of the atmosphere. We should probably do something. And through the 60s, 70s and into the 80s, the scientists were going, no, we really should do something. And in 1988, it burst onto the public scene. There was a big conference, there was this scientist who gave testimony, and in the end of 1988, Margaret Thatcher herself gave a speech saying, climate change is real, we should do something about it. So, before a lot of you were born, I assume a lot of you were born after that time. Okay, so, if I had 50 quid, which I don't because I'm a starving student like you guys, and I offered it to someone who could explain climate change to a room of people who don't understand climate change in a minute, and you would get 50 quid, but if you didn't do it well, you would pay 10 quid. Would anyone take me up on that bet in this room? Excellent. After today, if you ever come across that bizarre situation, you'll be able to. You're lying in bed on a Sunday morning, bit of a hangover, you're under a duvet. You're not too warm, you're not too cold. What happens if someone comes in and takes the duvet off? Too cold? Yeah. What happens if someone comes in and throws another duvet on? Feels really good initially, but then you're too warm. And that is climate change. So there is a duvet around the planet of gases, carbon dioxide, methane, that trap a certain amount of the heat. And what we're doing by burning fossil fuels, oil, coal and gas, is making the duvet thicker. That's all you need to know, really. And you would have won 50 quid. So if someone wants to get a time machine, go ahead. Okay, so none of you will know what this is, but I'll very quickly tell you. The guy who started measuring carbon dioxide in 1957, his name was Charles Keeling. And he was doing this as part of the Cold War. The Americans were really interested in weather modification, using clouds and thunderstorms as a weapon against the Soviets. So there was money for basic science. And in 1957, we were down here at 315 parts per million, so a duvet and a bit. And today, we're up here at 400 parts per million, which is getting on for 2 duvets. And what's happening is the rate of increase is going up. And there are 2 reasons why. Any takers on either of the reasons?
Because it's following an exponential
Yeah,
increase.
but the physical processes. Any takers? So, are we burning more fossil fuels than we did 10 years ago?
Yes.
China, India, England, etc. What sorts of things remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere? Any physiologists here? Any biologists? Well, what forests? Yeah. What are we doing to the forests?
Sea forest.
KFC.
I'm not quite sure what you meant, but I'm going to move on. So at the same time that we're increasing the amount of carbon dioxide we put into the atmosphere from our cars, our factories, our coal-fired power stations, we're also decreasing the capacity of the planet to take the carbon out of the atmosphere. So it's a double whammy. Make sense? So now you know everything you need to know about climate change. Let's talk about sailing ships. So for hundreds of years, sailing ships basically identical. Yeah? You could be in 1400, you could be in 1800, you know how they work, etc. Then what happens? Steamships. Completely different way of thinking. So if you have all your money invested in sailing ships, and all of your social status is involved in you're a sailmaker or you know how to steer them, and then some idiot invents steamships, you're going to be happy? No. You're not going to be happy at all. Because there is an existing technology which is being hassled by a new technology. So what are some of the things that you would do to stop the new technology coming up?
That's the new technology.
Okay, yes.
Using the
So
castle that
you would increase your ability. You would make bigger sailing ships so they could go faster, or you would have double sails, or you could automate how you put the sails up so you don't have to employ as many people on your ship. And all these things happened. It's called the sailing ship effect. If there was a steamship that had an accident, would you publicise the fuck out of the fact that the steamship had an accident? Yeah, you would. So, this transition from sail ships to steamships is what's called a socio-technical transition, because it's a technology, sailing ship is a technology that's embedded in society. Does this make sense? So, other socio-technical transitions, well, we used to have horse and cart, but we now have motor cars. We used to poo in the back garden and some guy would come around and shovel it out, but we now have sewers. Does it always make sense? Okay, so all of the socio-technical transitions that we've had so far have been from low carbon to high carbon, sailing ships to steamships, horse and cart to motor car. So the European Union is hoping that Europe will be the centre of technologies for high carbon technologies like coal, oil, gas, internal combustion engine, to low carbon socio-technical systems. So they're investing lots of research money in things like offshore wind and fuel cells and solar panels. Does all this make sense? Because what they want is for us to maintain our lovely standard of living, but to do it at zero carbon. So what I'm involved in is looking at the coal industry, and this word counter-destabilisation. So an existing regime that is making loads of money, whether it's sailing ships or motor cars or the coal industry, will do things to defend itself. So back to the year 1988. If we had taken climate change seriously then, and the scientists were warning about what's happening now back then, they knew this was coming because they'd been studying it for 30 years. They kind of knew what was coming. If we had taken it seriously, we would have said, no more coal. Get rid of the coal. And the coal industry knew this, and so they started to defend themselves. So, for example, they set up this thing called the Global Climate Coalition, which sounds really cuddly, but it was a very well-funded, very determined effort to sow seeds of doubt and confusion about the existence of climate change and the cost of doing anything about it. So they went and made some legislation in 1992 at this thing called the Earth Summit, which made these big flowery statements about, oh, we're going to do something about climate change. We've not got a timetable, we've not got any deadlines, we've not got any penalties if we don't make it. Then a few years later they went, oh, that didn't work so well, let's have another one. And that was called the Kyoto Protocol. And the Americans said, we're not doing it. And the Australians said, we're only doing it if you let us increase our carbon emissions. And this is largely down to, no, I'm not kidding you, this is down to the political power of the fossil fuel industry and especially the coal industry. Okay? So that's what my PhD is looking at. It's kind of, it's not a who done it, we know who done it. It's not a why done it, because we know why they did it, to protect their investments. It's a how done it. It's a detective story. And questions? Oh, sorry, can I just say one thing? Could you turn to that person you spoke to first and think up a question? One of the two of you, whoever you were speaking to, think up a question, and we'll do it that way, because otherwise it will just be the same people asking questions. No offence, no offence. Can we do that just for 30 seconds? Talk to the person you were talking to before, come up with a question, and then pose me the question.